To date, Aurra Sing's screen time in the Star Wars movies totals to a little more than a few seconds. The character can be briefly spotted overlooking the pod racing sequence in episode 1. And yet, I remember being a child when this film was released and the enormous anticipation around it. And some of the early promotional and marketing materials heavily publicised the inclusion of Aurra Sing as the new bounty hunter. There was a real strong feeling amongst me and my friends at the time that Aurra Sing was going to be developed in future movies and be a really big deal on the same sort of level as Boba Fett. Ultimately, of course, that proved not to be the case, and although there's been a revisitation in later years through cartoons and of course comic books, the character was largely discarded and overlooked for many, many years. And yet, oddly, I've always maintained a sort of affection for this character. I always quite liked the visual look of the character, and when Hasbro announced they were making a 6-inch figure of it for their Black series, I was really excited to get a hold of one. And so today, I'm really pleased to be able to give you my review of the 6-inch Aurra Sing figure. Starting with the packaging, she has been released in that standard trapezoid shaped box. It has the usual window display where we can see the figure there, and then of course on the side panel we have this really nice artwork and that colour scheme there, which I think is really attractive and looks really good when you stack this up with other figures in the collection. So if you want to put them on the shelf, this looks really attractive. On the reverse of the packaging we have some more of this artwork. Again, we can see this enlarged here and looks pretty good. It's in mostly grayscale, but this is pretty nicely rendered. And then there's a bit of bio about the character there. Other than that, not an awful lot going on, but this is pretty standard for the line. First impressions removing the figure from the packaging is that pleasingly she doesn't disappoint. The figure is very bright and colourful, and at first glance looks to be really authentic to what I envision the character to be. Now, I probably should point out that this is based on her appearance in the Clone Wars and the animated series, I believe, but in terms of the likeness, I think they've done a pretty decent job of capturing her actual on-screen likeness too. And although there's not an awful lot of paint applications on this figure, which would have been appreciated, especially in the body, as we can see in the production image there, we can see there's a lot of dirt on the actual costume, whereas on the figure, it's very, very clean. They have at least done a very, very nice job on the face, and particularly around the eyes. There's a lot of shading there that makes this look a bit more interesting, but also very faithful to the source material, and it looks quite striking. So I think they've done a very nice job of this in terms of the sculpt and the paint apps. Both the jacket and the gun holster are separate plastic pieces. They are fairly nicely painted. There's some little details in there, such as the buckle and the chains, which are very finely painted. There's no smudging here. This looks pretty authentic, pretty nicely, finely done. And there's some nice colouring in the hair. There's some different shades of brown, and there's individual beads that have been painted as well, which look really good. However, the one criticism I would have is that the choice of orange between the legs and the upper torso and the lower torso are very different shades, and this does stand out quite a bit. Most of this figure has been recycled from other parts, but I think possibly that the boots are new. I may be mistaken, but I haven't seen these before. Likewise, the arms seem to be new to me. They seem to be a lot longer. They're a bit more elongated than I'm used to seeing. Now, that might be an optical illusion. I might be wrong on that, but from what I can tell, they do seem to be a slightly different mould. Likewise, the hands are definitely a brand new mould. There's no real surprises when it comes to the articulation scheme. It is the standard scheme we're used to seeing. There's a ball joint in the head, allowing the head to turn from side to side and look up and down. Now, this is limited somewhat by the plastic hairpiece. As you can see there, it will stop the head going forwards and backwards a fair distance, so you do have to work with that a little bit. There is a ball joint in the shoulder, allowing the arms to kick up and out, and then there is a pin swivel at the elbow, allowing the lower arm to swivel right the way around and of course hinge up and down. Then there is another pin swivel at the wrist, so again that wrist can rotate 360 degrees, and of course it can hinge forwards and backwards as well. Now there's another ball joint in the upper torso, allowing the figure to turn from side to side, lean left and right, and of course bend forwards and backwards. There's more ball joints in the hips, allowing the legs to kick out to the side. They are hindered somewhat by that plastic harness, and there is an upper thigh swivel as well. The legs can kick forwards easily enough and backwards a little bit. There's double jointed knees, so the lower leg can kick right the way back there. There is a swivel at the top of the boot there, which is great, and then there is finally an ankle pivot at the ankle there, so of course the foot can hinge forwards and backwards, and it can move from side to side. For a bounty hunter, she doesn't really come with an awful lot of accessories, but she does come with everything you would expect. So she does of course have her long-range sniper rifle and 2 identical blasters. The gun holster is moulded perfectly to accommodate these blasters, and they fit very snugly into place. Despite having slightly unusual fingers, they have moulded this weapon perfectly, so again, both her fingers can slot through the individual trigger points there, which looks really good and snug and fits very tightly into her grip. The rifle is a bit more tricky for it to hold. There's no really obvious gripping points for it. On the handle, there isn't a finger holder, so she can really tightly grip that trigger. It's just kind of a bit loose. It will fit into a grip nicely, and she can grab the barrel with the opposite hand, which is good, but it does look a little bit clunky, and it's really not helped by the fact that the big strap there is another plastic piece that just kind of very easily comes away. It's kind of held together by these 2 very loose connections, and it just wants to sort of unclip all the time. So it's not really strong enough, I wouldn't think, to be able to put around her and stay on her back. And yeah, it can make it a little bit tricky when you're trying to pose her, because you do want it to just disconnect all the time. The other criticism I would have of the rifle is that although the mold is very, very nice and pretty accurate to what we see in the source material, it's not particularly well painted, and I think if they just capitalised on this sculpt with a nice paint wash, they could have really made something special out of this. As it is, it feels a little cheap and unfinished. For me, this has to be a 4-star figure. I actually think they've done a really nice job with this figure. The sculpt is really good, the paint apps that are there are very nicely applied. It's definitely recognisable as the character that I wanted to see. She has some fun accessories and great articulation. The downside, however, is that she's definitely let down by the mismatch in shade of orange plastic between her torso, her legs, and her lower torso. That is pretty disappointing. Likewise, I think the lack of shading on that sniper rifle there is just a missed opportunity. But all in all, this is a pretty fun figure, and I think if you're a fan of the character or you're just a Star Wars completist, you're going to want to pick this up because this is actually a pretty nice entry in the line. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like and remember to subscribe as there'll be plenty more videos soon.